Hi, I'm Vespera. I woke up in a hospital bed, bruised and barely breathing, with divorce papers waiting beside me, while my little girl was fighting for her life in the ICU. And him? He was on a beach with my sister, smiling for the world, calling it their perfect little family. How do you even begin to breathe when the people you trust most rip your world apart? Stay with me, because what I did next made them both cry. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening to this, and where from? Drop a comment below. I read every one. I woke to the rhythmic beeping of a machine and the sting of antiseptic in the air. My body felt like it had been folded and left in the sun too long, tight, aching, brittle. It took a moment for the room to settle in my vision. Off-white walls, a plastic curtain drawn halfway, a tray of untouched Jell-O, and a bouquet of flowers already wilting on the counter. My mouth tasted like metal. For a second, I thought maybe I'd been dreaming. Maybe the headlights, the screech of tires, the deafening crunch, it had all been some terrible nightmare. But then I tried to move, and the pain slammed through me like a warning. This was no dream. I was alive, but barely. My first thought was of Coraline, my little girl. Panic pushed me upright, but my body betrayed me, sending me back against the pillow with a gasp. I scanned the room, hoping for a sign she was here, safe. Instead, I saw it, a thick manila envelope on the tray beside me, my name scrawled across the front in Dorian's neat handwriting. My breath caught. I knew before I opened it what it was, but my shaking fingers still fumbled with the flap. Divorce papers. Served while I lay unconscious. I flipped through them quickly, the legal jargon blurring together, but one line hit me with a force stronger than any car could. He was filing for full custody of Coraline, full custody. My heart thudded so hard it drowned out the monitors. My husband, no, my ex-husband-to-be, had chosen the moment I was broken and helpless to carve me out of my own child's life. I couldn't breathe. I grabbed for my phone, needing to hear his voice, to understand. Maybe there was some explanation. Maybe this wasn't what it looked like. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications, texts I hadn't read, voicemails I didn't dare open, and then the photos. Dorian, on a beach, with Celiora, my sister. They were smiling, sun-kissed, arms around each other like they'd been waiting for the moment I was out of the way to start their own little fantasy. And there it was, in bold letters under one photo. Our perfect little family. My throat burned. Coraline wasn't in those pictures. She was here. My baby girl was fighting for her life in the ICU, while her father sipped cocktails and played house with my sister. For a moment, I just stared, numb. I couldn't even summon tears, though my body felt like it might tear itself apart from the inside. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone, to tear up every last page of those papers and shove them down his throat. Instead, I sat there, clutching the phone so tightly the edge dug into my palm. Quiet. Still. Flashes of the accident jolted through me like lightning. Headlights coming at me too fast, the crunch of metal folding around us, the sharp smell of burning rubber. Was it just bad luck? Or, no. No. I wouldn't go there. Not yet. I stared at those photos until the edges of my vision blurred. The betrayal wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just Dorian walking out. It was Celiora, my sister, the one person who was supposed to have my back. And they weren't even hiding it. They were parading their betrayal for the world to see while my daughter clung to life. Something inside me shifted. It was subtle, quiet, but real, a heat blooming under my ribs. It wasn't despair. Not anymore. It was anger. Cold, cutting anger that steadied my hands as I folded the papers back up. I wasn't going to let them erase me. Not from Coraline's life. Not from my own. The door creaked, and a nurse stepped in, clipboard in hand, her face all polite smiles. "Are you ready to talk about your discharge plans?" she asked softly, as if I might break from the sound of her voice. I didn't answer her right away. My eyes stayed fixed on that envelope, on the neat little letters of my name in his handwriting. I could hear my own voice in my head, calm and sharp, like the kind of voice you use when you're done being the victim. "This isn't over," I whispered. And for the first time since waking up, I believed it. But where do I even begin when my entire life has been rewritten without me? That thought echoed in my head as I slid into the back seat of the rideshare 2 days after leaving the hospital. My body still ached with every bump in the road, but my mind felt sharper than it had in weeks. I kept my gaze fixed out the window as the skyline gave way to the familiar tree-lined streets of Oak Park. It had been years since I'd been back to that house, yet even the air smelled the same, like old wood and faint lavender detergent. When the car stopped in front of my childhood home, my stomach turned. The place looked smaller, sadder than I remembered, the paint chipping near the porch, the flower beds bare. I sat there for a moment, clutching my bag, willing myself to believe this was a refuge. But deep down, I knew better. Mildred opened the door before I could knock, her face arranged into that careful expression she used when she didn't want to look too pleased or too disappointed. "You look tired, Vess," she said, her voice flat. "Maybe this isn't the place for you right now. No hug, no thank God you're alive. Just that." I stepped inside anyway, ignoring the chill in her words. The house smelled of stale coffee and lemon polish. I eased myself into the kitchen chair like a guest in a stranger's home. She busied herself with a teapot, her back to me, as though making tea could mask the tension hanging in the air. "I just need a few days to get my bearings," I said quietly, watching her movements. Mildred set 2 mugs on the table and finally looked at me. "Vess," she began, too calmly, "you need to think about what's best for Coraline." My heart skipped. I knew that tone. Soft enough to sound reasonable, sharp enough to cut. "What are you saying, Mom?" She folded her hands on the table like she was delivering some practiced line. "Celiora can provide a better home for her right now. She's stable. You need time to heal. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I stared at her, words failing me for a moment. My mother, my own mother, was siding with them. With her. The betrayal sliced deeper than any accident injury. "So that's it?" I finally said, my voice shaking. "You think the woman who's sleeping with my husband is better for my child than I am?" Her jaw tightened. "It's not about that. It's about Coraline's stability." I let out a bitter laugh, one I didn't recognize as my own. "Stability? Is that what you call stealing someone's life and child?" She flinched, but didn't argue. Instead, she pushed the tea toward me like that could soothe the wound she'd just opened. That night, long after Mildred retreated to her room, I crept back into the kitchen. The moonlight cut across the counters, highlighting a stack of unopened mail she'd left sitting near the toaster. I rifled through it with careful hands, my pulse quickening with each envelope. Then I saw them, bank statements. I pulled them out and skimmed through the pages, thousands spent at luxury hotels, high-end restaurants, jewelry stores, all of it charged to our joint account. My throat tightened as I realized the dates lined up perfectly with the photos Dorian and Celiora had posted. He'd been wining and dining my sister with the money that was supposed to keep our lives afloat, while our daughter's medical bills sat unpaid. My hands trembled, but I steadied them enough to snap photos of each page with my phone. Every receipt, every charge. Proof. "You want stability?" I whispered into the silence, the words tasting like steel in my mouth. "I'll show you what real stability looks like." My phone buzzed in my hand, making me jolt. A text from Dorian lit up the screen. Let's make this easy. Sign the papers. Don't drag Coraline through this. I gripped the phone until my knuckles went white. Easy. He thought stealing my child and my life would be easy. Easy. He thought stealing my child and my life would be easy. That text sat like a stone in my stomach all week, even as I forced myself to function. Later that Thursday, I found myself sitting in a stiff vinyl chair in Coraline's hospital room, the steady hum of machines filling the silence. Her tiny hand lay curled in mine, so soft, so fragile, yet it anchored me more than anything else could. She blinked up at me with that disarming innocence only children can carry. "Mommy?" Her voice came out like a whisper. "Yes, baby." I squeezed her hand lightly. Do I call Auntie Mommy now? Daddy says she takes care of me now." The words punched the air out of my lungs. My ears rang. I wanted to scream, to demand who had fed her that poison, but all I could manage was a smile that felt like it would crack my face in two. "No, sweetheart," I said softly, brushing a strand of hair off her forehead. "Mommy's still here." "Mommy's always here." She nodded, accepting my words with the unshakable trust only a child can give, then drifted back into a light sleep. I sat frozen, staring at her little chest rising and falling, my own heart breaking into pieces too small to count. I couldn't breathe in that room anymore. I slipped out into the hallway, leaning against the cool wall tiles as hot tears blurred my vision. I covered my mouth, desperate to muffle the sound. That one innocent question had shattered me more than the accident, more than the betrayal, more than any wound they could inflict. By the time I returned to my townhouse that evening, the grief had hardened into something else. Resolve. The quiet kind that doesn't announce itself, but drives you forward. I couldn't just sit and hurt anymore. I needed answers. I set my bag down on the kitchen table, powered up my laptop, and pulled out my phone. My hands moved with purpose as I combed through Dorian's call logs and emails. Each number, each subject line, was a thread I followed, piecing together a timeline of his deceit. Late-night calls to Celiora, emails from hotel chains, receipts for dinners that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. It painted a picture I wished I could unsee, but wishing had never saved anyone. That night, I dialed Celiora. It took everything in me to steady my voice as the line connected. "Vess?" she answered, hesitant. "I thought we should talk," I said, my tone deceptively calm. "About everything." There was a pause, then a sigh. "It's complicated. You know Dorian needed someone. You were so busy, always working, always distracted. He needed to feel cared for." Her words, dripping with self-justification, made my hands shake, but I didn't interrupt. I let her talk, let her rewrite the story in a way that made her betrayal seem like charity. "You were never truly there for him," she added. Like twisting the knife wasn't enough. She had to make sure it left a scar. I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back, but not before I pressed record. Every word she'd said now lived in my phone. Proof. I replayed it once, twice, just to feel the sting. Then I opened my contacts and found Rowella's number. A friend had once mentioned she was a bulldog in family court. Exactly what I needed. I left her a voicemail. "Hi, this is Vespera. I need help. I need to fight for my daughter. Please call me back." When I hung up, the apartment was silent, but inside me there was a roar. I sat back on the couch, replaying Celiora's voice again. "You were too busy." It echoed like a dare. Too busy? They had no idea what I was capable of when I stopped being the quiet one. That thought kept me steady as I buttoned my coat and stepped into the biting Chicago air the next morning. The city felt different, harsher, sharper, but maybe it was me. I wasn't just reeling anymore. I was preparing. Rowella's office was in one of those older downtown buildings that smelled faintly of polished wood and history. I rode the creaky elevator up to the 4th floor, palms damp despite the winter chill still clinging to me. The plaque on her door read simply, Rowella Kane, Family Law. It felt both ordinary and monumental, like crossing a threshold I couldn't uncross. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Rowella was tall, composed, her dark hair pulled back into a no-nonsense bun, her office lined with certificates and shelves full of neatly organized files. "Vespera," she said, offering a firm handshake. "You want to fight for your daughter? Then you need to be prepared for war." War. It sounded dramatic, but the way she said it, calm, deliberate, made it sink in. I nodded and sat down across from her desk, clutching my bag like a shield. I handed over the folder of bank statements, receipts, and call logs I'd compiled. She flipped through them quickly, her sharp eyes scanning every line. "You did your homework," she said, almost impressed. Then she paused at a page and tapped her pen against it. "This isn't just an affair, Vespera. He's been transferring marital assets into an account under your sister's name. These aren't small amounts either. Tens of thousands. Jewelry, hotels, wire transfers." My stomach turned. "He's moving our money to her?" "Yes," she said flatly. "This is calculated. He's building a financial shield around himself, probably trying to starve you out of resources before a custody fight." Custody. The word made my chest tighten. I'd been so focused on surviving, on Coraline, that I hadn't truly processed the legal side of all this. Rowella set the papers down and looked me in the eye. "And there's more. Dorian's already filed for emergency custody." "What?" My voice cracked, too loud in the quiet office. She didn't flinch. "He's painting you as unfit, mentally unstable after the accident, emotionally incapable of caring for your daughter. He's using your trauma against you. It's a classic play, and an ugly one." I stared at her, numb. The accident had left me physically broken, and now he was weaponizing that against me. "So what do I do?" I asked, though the words felt small, inadequate for the storm inside me. "We fight smarter," she said. "We gather evidence. Everything you can get your hands on. Financial records, text messages, emails. We'll bring in witnesses who can vouch for your fitness as a parent. And you," she pointed at me with her pen, "you stay calm, outwardly composed. Let them underestimate you." Her confidence was contagious. I felt my breathing slow, my back straighten. "They want to take Coraline from me," I said, more to myself than her. "They want to erase me from her life." "And we won't let them," Rowella replied. I nodded slowly, gripping the edge of the chair. For the first time since waking up in that hospital bed, I felt a flicker of control. The fear was still there, yes, but now it burned alongside something else. Resolve. "They want a war?" I said, my voice steady, my hands no longer trembling. "I'll give them one." Rowella allowed herself the faintest hint of a smile. "Good. But remember, don't be surprised if they escalate. Desperate people do desperate things." Her words followed me as I left the office. Outside, the Chicago wind cut through me, sharp and merciless, but I clutched the case file to my chest like armor. They thought I was too busy, too broken, too quiet. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. I knew they'd escalate, but I didn't expect how low they'd go next. It started on a Saturday morning. I woke up to my phone buzzing endlessly on the nightstand. Dozens of missed calls, even more texts. My stomach dropped before I even looked. That kind of volume was never good news. When I opened my messages, I froze. Screenshots. Dozens of them. My medical records, details about my accident, hospital photos where I looked half dead, were plastered online, and not just dumped in some corner of the internet. They were on social media, attached to posts with captions like, "Would you leave your child with someone this unstable?" My heart sank as I scrolled through the comments. People I didn't know dissecting my life like I was a scandal to gossip about. She's clearly not well. That poor little girl deserves better. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. How did they even get these? Only a few people had access to those records. Dorian, Celiora, and my mother. And I sat on the kitchen floor, my back pressed against the cabinets, the tile cold through my pajama pants. It felt like my skin had been stripped away, like every private wound was now a public exhibit. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. By the time the texts from my mother came in, "Come over, we need to talk." I was numb. I shouldn't have gone. Every instinct told me to stay away. But part of me still believed maybe she'd finally defend me, stand by me, even just hold me like she used to when I was little. Her house hadn't changed. The same lace curtains, the same family photos on the walls, though most of them were of Celiora and her kids. I walked in, and it hit me instantly. This wasn't a talk. This was an ambush. There they were. My mother at the head of the dining table, a few aunts and uncles flanking her like it was some tribunal. Their eyes flicked to me, cold and judging. "You look exhausted," Mildred said, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "Maybe it's time you start thinking about what's really best for Coraline." My chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" She folded her hands primly. "Celiora has been a better mother to her than you lately. You're drowning, Vespera. It's time to stop being selfish." Selfish? That word sliced through me like a blade. "Selfish," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to keep it steady. "You think letting them parade around with my husband and take my child while I'm still in recovery is selfless?" "She needs stability," my mother pressed on. "Celiora and Dorian can give her that. You need help, dear." The relatives around the table nodded, some avoiding my gaze. Their silence said everything. They'd already chosen their side. I could have fought back. I could have laid out every vile thing Dorian and Celiora had done. But what would be the point? They didn't want the truth. They wanted me broken, begging, defeated. So I stood. Pushed my chair back slowly, deliberately, and without another word, I walked out. The drive home blurred together. My hands clenched the steering wheel, but I couldn't even feel them. By the time I stepped back into my townhouse, the numbness had been replaced by something else. A quiet, simmering fury. They wanted to destroy me in public? Fine. They could play that game. I sat at my dining table, pulled out my laptop, and started documenting everything. Dates, times, receipts, copies of every message and transfer. Every piece of evidence that would burn their narrative to the ground. They thought dragging me through the mud would break me, but I was done playing the victim in their story. Late that night, as I organized the files, my phone buzzed with a new message. An unknown number. "You don't know half of what they've planned." I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. Whoever it was, they'd just given me my first real advantage. I didn't know who sent that message, but I knew it was my first real advantage. I spent the night turning it over in my head, staring at the glow of my phone in the dark. Whoever had sent it clearly knew something, and I wasn't in a position to ignore leads, no matter how strange they seemed. By sunrise, I had read and reread the text so many times that my eyes burned. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for what felt like an hour before I typed out a cautious reply. "Who are you? What do you know?" The response came minutes later. "We need to meet. Somewhere public." That alone told me they weren't playing games. I chose a quiet coffee shop a few blocks from my townhouse, a place that was never crowded but had enough foot traffic to keep things from feeling dangerous. As I got ready, I couldn't shake the nerves twisting in my stomach. My world had already been ripped apart, Meeting strangers felt like inviting a new threat in. Still, I went. I didn't have the luxury of staying in the dark. When I walked in, I spotted her immediately, a young woman sitting near the back, fidgeting with her sleeve. She looked up at me like she'd been scanning every face that walked through the door. "Vespera?" she asked quietly. I nodded, sliding into the seat across from her. "That's me. And you are?" Her voice trembled. "Call me Grace. I used to work for Dorian. I can't stay silent anymore." For a moment, I couldn't even respond. Hearing his name from her lips, tied to this confession, made my chest tighten. "You worked for him? Then you know what he's doing to me." Grace exhaled sharply. "I know more than that. I know what he and Celiora are planning. And I couldn't keep helping them after I saw what they were doing to you." She pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. I hesitated before picking it up. Dozens of screenshots filled the screen. Emails, text messages, calendar invites. I scrolled through them, my hands growing colder with each one. Dorian and Celiora had been plotting this for months, strategizing, twisting everything. And my mother? They were using her like a chess piece. One email from Dorian to Celiora hit me like a punch. "If Mildred reinforces the unfit mother angle, the court will side with us faster. Vespera won't see it coming." I could barely breathe. "They're using my own mother," I whispered, mostly to myself. Grace nodded. "And that's not all." She dug into her bag and pulled out a small flash drive. Recordings. Meetings where they discussed painting you as unstable, a liability. I kept copies. "You'll want these." I didn't realize I was gripping the table until I felt the edge digging into my palms. "Why are you helping me?" She looked me dead in the eye. "Because I know what it feels like to be chewed up and discarded by them. And because what they're doing to you, it's evil." I swallowed the lump in my throat. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. "Thank you," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "You don't know what this means to me." When we left, I didn't go straight home. I went directly to Rowella's office. If anyone could make sense of this and turn it into a weapon, it was her. She barely glanced up from her laptop as I walked in. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. "I've seen something worse." I dropped the flash drive on her desk. "Dorian and Celiora. Everything they've been doing. It's all on here." That got her attention. She plugged it in, scanning through the files quickly. When she reached one of the recordings, Celiora's voice, sharp and casual. "Once she's out of the picture, Coraline will barely remember her." Rowella paused the playback and leaned back in her chair. "This," she said, almost to herself, "changes everything." "What do we do?" I asked, my voice low but steady. She gave me a look I hadn't seen before, a mix of approval and battle readiness. "We build your case. We use every email, every recording, and we show the court exactly who they are. They wanted to frame you. Fine. Let them try while we bury them with their own words." As I left her office, I felt something I hadn't felt since the accident, a spark of control. They wanted me erased, to be a footnote in Coraline's life, but I wasn't going quietly. That night, I sat in my living room, lights off, listening to Celiora's voice on repeat. Each time I heard her laugh, that ugly, mocking laugh, the anger in me sharpened into something usable. "You want me erased?" I whispered into the darkness. "Let's see how you handle the spotlight." If they thought I'd stay quiet, they'd forgotten who raised me. My mother may have turned against me, but she also taught me one thing I'll never forget: how to survive when you're cornered. And right now, I was more than cornered. I was being erased. That thought alone gave me the courage to walk into Rowella's office the next morning with my mind made up. She didn't even look up from her paperwork as she spoke. "You're here early. That usually means you've done something dangerous or you're about to." "I want to go public," I said. My voice didn't waver, but my pulse was hammering in my ears. That got her attention. She dropped her pen and studied me. "If you go public, there's no turning back. They'll come for blood." I leaned forward, my hands clasped tight in my lap. "They already have. They've dragged me through the mud, taken my daughter, my dignity. If they want to destroy me, fine. But I'm not going down alone." Rowella sat back in her chair, silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "All right, we do this carefully. No raw emotional rants, no feeding them ammunition. You give me the recordings, the emails. I'll clean them up and make sure what's released can't be twisted against you." It took all day. We sat together, combing through files, redacting names where needed, cutting audio clips down to the sharpest, ugliest truths. Celiora's laughter about taking Coraline. Dorian's emails bragging about manipulating my mother. It was like holding my own heartbreak in my hands, but now it had teeth. By the afternoon, I was at the local TV station, sitting across from a journalist Rowella trusted, a woman named Tamara who'd made her career exposing family scandals. "This is brave," she said softly, scanning through the documents. "But it's going to get ugly." I almost laughed. It's already ugly. By evening, I had done it. Tamara aired a short segment on the 10 o'clock news, just enough to show the world the truth without compromising my case. At the same time, I posted my own statement on social media. Short, sharp, calculated. When family betrays you, the world deserves to know. And attached were clips of Celiora's voice saying, "Once she's out of the picture, Coraline will barely remember her." Screenshots of Dorian's messages about using my mother as leverage. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to make them squirm. I didn't sleep that night. My phone buzzed non-stop. Notifications from strangers, friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were supportive, others were cruel. By morning, their world had begun to crumble. Dorian's colleagues were reportedly distancing themselves. Celiora's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. People weren't just disgusted, they were furious. But of course they hit back, they always do. Within 24 hours, Rowella called me with the news. "They've filed a countersuit for defamation. They're claiming you manipulated the evidence." I felt my stomach drop. "Of course they are." "And Celiora posted her own statement," Rowella added grimly. "This is a smear campaign by a bitter ex-wife, blah blah. They're circling the wagons." It wasn't just legal threats. My inbox was flooded with hate messages, anonymous accounts calling me unfit, texts warning me to back off before I regret it. It was like every corner I turned had another shadow waiting. That night, I sat in my living room, my hands wrapped around a mug of untouched tea, scrolling through the chaos I'd unleashed. Satisfaction and terror twisted together in my chest. It felt good, finally hitting back, but it also felt like standing on the edge of a cliff in the dark. Rowella had warned me, "They'll push you to break. They want you rattled, because rattled people make mistakes." But I wasn't rattled. Not anymore. 2 days later, I stood in front of the courthouse, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions I didn't answer. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and whispered to myself so softly only I could hear, "You wanted a war. You've got one." But I hadn't seen their most vicious move yet, the one that nearly broke me for good. 2 days before the custody hearing, I walked into the ICU with a bag of Coraline's favorite books, planning to spend the afternoon reading to her. I wasn't ready for the sight that greeted me. Dorian was at the nurse's station, red-faced and shouting, waving a folder in one hand. "I have emergency parental rights," he barked. "You can't stop me from taking my daughter out of here." I froze, then my legs carried me forward before my brain even caught up. "Over my dead body," I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. Every head in the hallway turned. Dorian turned to me, smugness replacing his anger. Vespera, you can't even take care of yourself. The court will back me on this. Get out, I said, stepping between him and the hallway leading to Coraline's room. You're not taking her anywhere. Don't do this, he warned, lowering his voice so only I could hear. You're making yourself look unstable, exactly what everyone expects. That word, unstable, cut deeper than his shouting ever could. It was the narrative they'd spun, now weaponized in public. My hands shook, but I didn't move. Security arrived, 2 large men in uniform flanking us. One of the nurses explained in hushed tones that no one, not even a parent, could remove a child without a court order. Dorian was escorted out, muttering threats over his shoulder. I stood there, breathing hard, gripping the strap of my bag until my knuckles went white. By the time I stepped into Coraline's room, my knees felt weak. She was sleeping peacefully, her small body dwarfed by the hospital bed. I sat down in the chair next to her, dropping my head into my hands. I didn't cry, not there, but the shaking wouldn't stop. Rowella arrived an hour later, summoned by one frantic call I barely remembered making. She crouched in front of me, her hands on my knees. This is their last play, she said softly. They're trying to rattle you before court. Hold on, you're closer than you think. Her words steadied me. Barely. That evening, I returned home exhausted, my body heavy with the weight of the day. I had just sunk into the couch when a knock came at the door. It was my mother. Mildred looked smaller than I remembered. Her shoulders slumped, her face pale. She clutched her coat like it was armor. I opened the door wider, wary. What are you doing here? She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. I needed to see you, she said, her voice trembling. I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall. Why? To tell me again how Celiora's the better mother? Or maybe to remind me that Dorian's just doing what's best for Coraline? Her eyes welled with tears. I was wrong. The words didn't register at first. She sank onto the couch, wringing her hands. They told me you were unstable. That the accident had made you dangerous, that Coraline would be safer with them, and I... Her voice cracked. I believed them. I let them use me against you. And I can't live with that. The room felt impossibly quiet. For months, I had carried the weight of her betrayal like a stone pressing into my chest. Hearing her say it, admit it, was like finally exhaling after holding my breath too long. I sat beside her, my body stiff. You hurt me, I said, my voice low. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I know, and I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to help. I'll testify. I'll tell the court how they manipulated me, whatever you need. I didn't forgive her, not yet, but the crushing loneliness that had followed me everywhere softened just enough for me to breathe. We sat in silence for a long time before she left, her promise hanging in the air like a lifeline. As I locked the door behind her, I felt something ignite inside me. Not rage this time, but resolve. I walked to my desk, grabbed the case file Rowella had prepared, and set it on the table. My hands no longer trembled. It ends tomorrow, I whispered. The next morning, I walked toward the courthouse, the cold wind biting at my face, my head high. This wasn't just about custody anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. The courthouse smelled of paper, coffee, and anxiety. Every sound, the shuffle of shoes, the clack of keyboards, the murmurs of lawyers, felt louder than it should. My heart thudded like I was walking into a battlefield, not a custody hearing. But it was both. Rowella brushed my arm as we entered the courtroom. Remember, she said softly, speak when spoken to, stay calm, and let me lead. They'll try to provoke you. I nodded, gripping the worn handle of Coraline's favorite stuffed bunny, the one I had brought to the hospital on the day this nightmare began. I told myself it wasn't a good luck charm. It was a reminder. This wasn't about me. It was about my daughter. Dorian sat at the opposite table, his suit perfectly tailored, his face an impassive mask. Celiora was next to him, but she wouldn't look at me. Mildred sat behind me, close enough that I could feel her presence. For once, she was on my side. The judge entered, and the room shifted. This was it. Rowella began by laying out the case with cool precision. Your Honor, this is not just a custody dispute. This is about a calculated effort by Mr. Dorian Rains and Ms. Celiora Moore to strip my client, Mrs. Vespera Rains, of her rights as a mother using deceit, character assassination, and financial manipulation. Dorian's lawyer smirked. Your Honor, we're here because Mrs. Rains has demonstrated instability. We have medical records, photographs, and testimony. Rowella cut in sharply. Which were obtained and leaked unlawfully. And we will prove that. Then came Mildred, my mother. She walked to the stand slowly, her voice trembling at first. I need to tell the truth. She glanced back at me, tears welling. I believed what they told me, that my daughter was unstable, that Coraline would be better off with them. They used me. They lied to me, and I let them, but I won't let them take her child. Gasps rippled through the room. Dorian's jaw tightened, and Celiora shifted uncomfortably. Then Rowella dropped the bomb. Your Honor, we submit emails and audio recordings, legally obtained through a whistleblower, proving a coordinated plan to portray Ms. Rains as unfit for custody while transferring marital assets to Mrs. Moore. The judge leaned forward. Proceed. The audio filled the room, Celiora's voice, laughing. Once she's out of the picture, Coraline will barely remember her. I saw the judge's face harden. When Celiora took the stand, Rowella pressed, Miss Moore, were you aware of Mr. Rains's plan to move Coraline out of state permanently? Celiora snapped. We were doing what's best for Coraline. Her voice cracked, panic seeping through. She doesn't need a mother who can't even take care of herself. The courtroom buzzed. The judge raised a hand for silence. Hours blurred into moments, and then it was time. The judge's verdict came measured, but it landed like a gavel to my chest. Ms. Vespera Rains retains primary custody of Coraline Rains. Mr. Dorian Rains's visitation will be supervised and limited. Furthermore, Mr. Rains is ordered to provide financial restitution for concealed assets. This court finds that actions taken by Mr. Rains and Ms. Moore constitute manipulation and deceit in this matter. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I exhaled, shakily, as if I'd been underwater for months. Dorian sat hollow-eyed, staring at nothing. Celiora covered her face with her hands. I didn't look at them again. When we left the courtroom, Coraline's small hand curled into mine like it belonged there all along. That night, back home, I tucked her into bed. She clutched the stuffed bunny I'd brought from the hospital, her eyelids heavy with sleep. I kissed her forehead and whispered, We're safe now, and we're free. I sat in the quiet living room, staring at the walls that had once felt so empty, and thought, they broke my body. They tried to erase me, but I walked out whole, and louder than ever. Have you ever had to fight everyone you love just to keep what matters most? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one.